The woman standing in the doorway of the small cabin had eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and tears shed in silence. And when Silas Jennings rode past that autumn morning in 1871, he heard the sound that would change everything, a child crying with the desperate wail of someone who needed more than his mother could give alone. Silas pulled his horse to a stop, the dust settling around the mare's hooves as he turned in the saddle. The cabin sat at the edge of Genoa, Nevada, a weathered structure that had seen better days. Wood planks showed gaps where the wind would whistle through come winter, and the roof sagged in the middle like a tired sigh. The woman stood there with a boy clutched to her chest, maybe 3 years old, his face red and streaked with tears. She looked young, mid-20s perhaps, with dark blonde hair pulled back in a practical bun, and a dress that had been mended more times than it had been new. Her eyes met his, and Silas saw something there that made his chest tighten. Not just exhaustion, though there was plenty of that. Not just worry, though he could see the lines it had carved around her mouth. It was desperation mixed with pride, the look of someone drowning who refused to call for help even as the water closed over their head. The boy wailed louder, his small hands clutching at his mother's collar. "Mama, it hurts. My head hurts. I know, baby, I know." Her voice cracked and she pressed her lips to his fevered forehead. "Mama's here. Mama's got you." Silas should have ridden on. He had a job waiting in Carson City, cattle work that would pay well enough to get him through the winter. He had learned long ago not to get involved in other people's troubles. The West was full of hard luck stories, and a man could drown in them if he let himself care too much. But something about the way she held that boy, the way her whole body curved around him like she could shield him from whatever pain racked his small frame, made Silas dismount. "Madam," his voice carried across the dusty yard, "is the boy all right?" She stiffened, her arms tightening around her son. "We're managing fine, thank you." Pride. He had expected that. Silas took off his hat, running a hand through his dark hair before approaching slowly, keeping his movements easy and non-threatening. "No disrespect intended, madam. I heard the little one crying. Sounds like he might be ailing." The boy's wails had subsided to hiccuping sobs against his mother's shoulder. She swayed slightly, rocking him, and Silas noticed how thin she was, how her dress hung loose where it should have fit properly. When had she last eaten a full meal? "He has a fever." The words came out clipped, defensive. "It will pass." "How long has he been sick?" "That's not your concern, mister." Her jaw set in a stubborn line, but her eyes betrayed her. They flickered past him to the empty road beyond, as if looking for someone who would never come. Silas put his hat back on and nodded. "You're right, madam. It isn't." He turned back toward his horse, made it 3 steps before he heard her voice again, quieter this time. 3 days. He stopped, waiting. "The fever started 3 days ago." She drew in a shaky breath. "I have been giving him cool water, keeping him in the shade, but it won't break, it just won't break, and I do not know what else to do." When Silas turned back, he saw the facade crumbling. Her lower lip trembled before she bit down on it hard. The boy had gone limp against her, his crying reduced to weak whimpers that somehow sounded worse than the wailing. "There's a doctor in town," Silas asked, "Dr. Patterson, but he wants payment up front." Her voice hardened with bitterness. $2 for a house call. $2. Not much for a man with work and prospects. A fortune for a woman alone with a sick child and empty pockets. Silas could see the calculation in her eyes, the desperate mathematics of survival. Food or medicine, rent or doctor. No good choices, only impossible ones. "I have money," Silas said. "I do not take charity." "Then borrow it, pay me back when you can." She laughed, a hollow sound without humor. "And how would I do that? With what? I have nothing, mister." Nothing except this cabin that does not belong to me and a son who needs more than I can give him." The boy stirred, whimpering. "Mama, I am cold. You are burning up, baby." She kissed his forehead again, and when she looked at Silas, tears finally spilled over. "Please. If you are offering help, I need it. God help me, I need it." Silas moved quickly then, crossing the distance between them. Up close he could see the boy's flushed cheeks, the glassy sheen of his eyes. "What's his name?" "Thomas, Tommy." She stroked the boy's sweat-dampened hair. "And I am Willa. Willa Owens. Silas Jennings." He met her gaze steadily. "I am going to fetch the doctor, Miss Owens. Will you let me do that?" She nodded, unable to speak past the tears. "Is there anyone who can sit with you? A neighbor, friend?" Willa shook her head. "The other families, they keep their distance. My husband died 8 months ago, and a woman alone with no prospects. Well, that makes people nervous. They think poverty might be catching." Silas felt anger flare in his chest at that, at the casual cruelty of people who called themselves civilized. But there was no time for anger now. "I will be back within the hour. Keep him cool as you can." He rode hard into town, his mare's hooves thundering against the packed earth of the main street. Genoa was not large, one of the oldest settlements in Nevada, tucked up against the eastern slope of the Sierra Nevada. The town had grown around the old trading post, serving the immigrants heading to California and the ranchers who had settled in the Carson Valley. Dr. Patterson's office sat above the general store, marked by a painted sign that swung in the breeze. Silas took the stairs 2 at a time. The doctor was an older man with steel-gray hair and spectacles perched on his nose. He looked up from the ledger he had been writing in, his expression shifting from mild curiosity to professional assessment as Silas burst through the door. "Dr. Patterson, I need you to come with me. There is a sick child, fever for 3 days." The doctor set down his pen. "The Owens boy. You know about him. Mrs. Owens was here yesterday asking for help." Patterson's mouth tightened. "She had no money. I told her I could not work for free." Silas pulled coins from his pocket and slapped them on the desk. "She has money now. Will you come?" Patterson counted the coins, nodded, and began gathering supplies into his medical bag. As they descended the stairs, he glanced at Silas. "You related to the Owens family. Never met them before today. Then why are you paying for the boy's care?" Silas untied his horse. "Because he is sick and his mother is frightened, and that seems like reason enough." They rode together back to the cabin, Silas's mare and the doctor's stolid gelding. Willa was still standing in the doorway where he had left her, but she had moved into the shade, sitting on the single step with Tommy cradled in her lap. She looked up as they approached, hope and fear warring in her expression. Dr. Patterson dismounted and approached with his bag. "Mrs. Owens, let me have a look at the boy." Willa carried Tommy inside, and Silas waited in the yard, giving them privacy. Through the open door he could see the cabin's interior. One room sparsely furnished, a bed in the corner, a table with 2 chairs, a cook stove that had seen better days. Clean, though, everything scrubbed and neat despite the poverty. A woman trying to maintain dignity in circumstances that offered none. Time crawled. Silas found himself pacing, his mind turning over questions he had no business asking. Where was the boy's father buried? How had he died? What was a woman like Willa Owens doing out here alone with no family, no support? The West was full of such stories, tragedies written in dust and hardship, but something about this one had gotten under his skin. After what felt like an eternity, Dr. Patterson emerged. His expression was serious but not grim. "The boy has scarlet fever, not as advanced as it could be, but it needs careful treatment." Silas felt his stomach drop. Is he going to be all right? If the fever breaks in the next day or 2, his chances are good. I have given Mrs. Owens' medicine to help bring the fever down and instructions for his care. She will need to keep him cool, get fluids in him, watch for any worsening of symptoms. And if the fever does not break, Patterson's silence was answer enough. I will check on him tomorrow, the doctor said. No charge for the follow-up visit. He glanced at Silas. That was a good thing you did today, Mr. Jennings. After the doctor left, Silas stood in the yard, uncertain. The job in Carson City would not wait forever. The smart thing would be to ride out now, let the doctor do his work, let Willa Owens manage her own troubles. But then he heard Tommy's voice, thin and querulous, and Willa's response, patient despite her exhaustion. Mama, I want water. I know, baby. Here, just a little sip. Silas tied his mare to the post and walked to the door. Willa was sitting on the bed with Tommy lying beside her, a damp cloth on his forehead. She looked up when Silas's shadow fell across the threshold. Mr. Jennings, I do not know how to thank you. No thanks needed. He gestured to the yard. But I noticed your woodpile is low. Mind if I chop some more before I head out? Her eyes widened. You have done more than enough already. Wood does not cost me anything but time, and I have some of that to spare. Before she could protest further, Silas found the axe leaning against the side of the cabin. The work felt good, the familiar rhythm of split wood and sweat. He could hear Willa singing softly inside, some lullaby meant to soothe her frightened son. Her voice was prettier than he expected, clear and true despite the weariness that weighed it down. The sun had moved considerably across the sky by the time Silas finished stacking the wood. He had cut enough to last a week at least, maybe more if she was careful. When he went back around front, Willa was standing in the doorway again, watching him. Tommy fell asleep, she said quietly. The medicine seems to be helping. That is good. An awkward silence stretched between them. Willa twisted her hands in her apron. Mr. Jennings, I meant what I said about paying you back. I do not know when or how, but I will find a way. Do not worry about that now. I do worry about it. I have to worry about it. She lifted her chin, and he saw pride there again, battered but unbroken. My husband used to say I was too stubborn for my own good. Maybe he was right, but I was raised to believe that debts must be paid. Silas studied her face, the determined set of her jaw, the shadows under her eyes. Then pay it forward someday. Help someone else who needs it. That is not how debts work. It is how kindness works. She blinked, and for a moment he thought she might cry again, but she mastered herself, drawing in a deep breath. Will you at least stay for supper? It is not much, but I make a decent stew, and it seems the least I can do. Silas should have said no. Should have ridden out before he got more tangled up in this woman's troubles than he already was. But the loneliness in her eyes matched something in his own chest, and before he could think better of it, he heard himself say, "That would be nice, thank you." Willa's stew was more than decent. It was good, rich with herbs and vegetables from what must have been a small garden out back. They ate at the rough table while Tommy slept on, his breathing easier now, the terrible flush fading from his cheeks. As they ate, Willa told Silas her story, the words spilling out as if she had been holding them in too long. She and her husband Jack had come to Nevada from Missouri 3 years ago, chasing the promise of land and opportunity. Jack had worked as a freighter, hauling goods between the mining camps and the settlements. Good work, steady pay. They had been saving to buy their own place, somewhere with good water and grazing land where they could build something lasting. Then Jack's wagon had hit a washed-out section of road during a spring storm. The wagon had gone over, taking him and 3 horses with it. He had died 3 days later from internal injuries, and in those 3 days, Willa had watched her whole future crumble. The company paid for the funeral, she said, staring into her bowl. But there was no compensation for his death, nothing to help Tommy and me. They said Jack knew the risks when he took the job. I tried to find work after that. Took in laundry, sewing, anything I could manage while caring for Tommy. But it is not enough. It is never enough. What about family? Anyone back in Missouri? She shook her head. My parents died of cholera when I was 16. Jack's family disowned him when he married me. They thought he could do better. A bitter smile flickered across her face. Maybe they were right. They were fools. Willa looked up, startled by the vehemence in his voice. Silas set down his spoon. Any man would be lucky to have you as a wife, Miss Owens. Your husband knew that, I am sure. Color rose in her cheeks, and she looked away. You do not know anything about me, Mr. Jennings. I know you are fighting like hell to take care of your son. I know you have kept your head up despite circumstances that would break most people. That tells me plenty. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Outside, the wind picked up, carrying the smell of sage and distant pine. Tommy stirred in his sleep, and Willa immediately rose to check on him, adjusting the cloth on his forehead, feeling for fever. Cooler, she breathed. He feels cooler. The relief in her voice made something twist in Silas's chest. He stood, carrying the bowls to the basin. That is good news. Yes. She sank down onto the edge of the bed, one hand resting on Tommy's small chest. I was so afraid. When he started getting sick, all I could think was that I could not lose him too. I could not survive losing him too. You will not lose him. He is going to be fine. Willa looked at him, and in the lamplight her eyes were very blue. You do not know that, no, but I believe it anyway. She smiled, a real smile this time, and it transformed her face. Silas realized with a start that she was beautiful, not in the polished way of the saloon girls or the respectable way of the church ladies, but with something raw and honest that struck him harder than either. I should go, Silas said, though he made no move toward the door. Let you rest. Will you come back tomorrow to check on Tommy? It was a simple question with complicated implications. Silas knew that if he walked out that door and kept riding, his life would continue in its familiar pattern. Drifting from job to job, town to town, alone because that was easier than risking connection. But if he came back tomorrow, he would be choosing something different, something that scared him more than any gunfight or stampede ever had. Yes, he said, I will come back. That night, Silas made camp under the stars a short distance from town. As he lay in his bedroll watching the constellations wheel overhead, he thought about Willa Owens and her son, about the way she had looked when hope finally crept back into her expression. He thought about the job waiting in Carson City and felt no urgency to claim it. He thought about the last time he had let himself care about someone and the hollow ache that had followed when she had chosen another man, a settled man with a house and prospects. Silas had sworn then to keep moving, to stay free of entanglements. But freedom, he was learning, sometimes felt an awful lot like loneliness. He rode back to Willa's cabin at mid-morning, leading his mare slowly along the rutted track. Smoke rose from the chimney, a good sign. When he called out from the yard, Willa appeared in the doorway with Tommy on her hip. The boy looked better, his color normal, his eyes bright with the inquisitive energy of a healthy child. Mr. Jennings, Tommy crowed. Mama said you were the nice man who helped me. Relief flooded through Silas so powerfully it nearly knocked him sideways. Hey there, Tommy, feeling better? My head does not hurt anymore. Mama says I have to stay inside today, but tomorrow maybe I can go outside. Willa's smile was radiant. The fever broke just before dawn. Dr. Patterson came by an hour ago and said Tommy is going to be just fine. That is wonderful news. It is everything, her voice caught. Thank you, Mr. Jennings. Thank you for giving me back my son. Silas, please call me Silas, she nodded. Then you should call me Willa. Tommy wriggled to be put down, and Willa set him on the floor inside where he could play with a set of carved wooden animals. She stepped out into the yard, pulling the door partly closed behind her. "I have been thinking," she said, "about how to repay you. I know you said not to worry about it, but I cannot help worrying. It is my nature." "Willa, please let me finish." She drew a breath. "I do not have money, but I can cook and clean. You mentioned heading to Carson City for work. I assume that means you will be staying in the area for a while. If you need somewhere to take meals or laundry done or mending, I can provide that. A fair trade for what you have done for us." It was a practical offer, sensible. But Silas heard the hope beneath it, the desire for some continuing connection, and it echoed his own feelings too clearly to deny. "That sounds more than fair," he said. "Though I do not want you to think of it as repayment. You do not owe me anything, Willa. Maybe not by your reckoning, but by mine I do." She folded her arms, not defensive this time but resolved. "I need to feel useful, Silas. I need to feel like I am contributing something besides need and trouble." He understood that better than she knew. "All right, then yes, I would appreciate the help." Her smile was brilliant. "Good. Have you eaten today?" "Not yet." "Then come inside, I will make breakfast." Over the following days, a rhythm developed. Silas rode into Carson City and took the cattle work, 12-hour days herding and branding, but he found himself back at Willa's cabin each evening, drawn by something stronger than logic. She would have dinner waiting, and after they ate, Silas would handle repairs around the property while Willa put Tommy to bed. The cabin's sagging roof got propped up, the gaps in the walls got chinked, the front step that had been ready to collapse got reinforced with new wood. They talked as they worked, sharing pieces of their pasts. Silas told her about growing up in Texas, the youngest of 5 brothers, all of them raised on a hardscrabble ranch that never quite produced enough to feed everyone. He talked about leaving at 17, drifting north through the territories, taking whatever work presented itself. Cowhand, ranch foreman, stage guard, deputy for a few months in Colorado until the politics got too thick to stomach. "You have lived so many lives," Willa said one evening as she hemmed a pair of his trousers that had torn on barbed wire. "Do you ever want to stop moving, settle somewhere?" Silas was replacing a broken hinge on the door. "Used to think I might. Met a woman in Wyoming, thought maybe she was the reason to stay put, but she married a banker instead." He shrugged, trying to make it seem inconsequential. "Turned out I was better at leaving anyway. Or maybe you just had not found the right reason to stay." Their eyes met across the small room and the air felt suddenly charged. Silas looked away first, uncomfortable with the intensity of his own emotions. "Maybe." Willa set aside her sewing. "Tommy's been asking about you, when you will come back, whether you like to fish. There is a creek about a mile east, runs cold and clear from the mountains. Jack used to take him sometimes before." She trailed off, swallowed. "Anyway, I thought maybe on Sunday, if you were not working, you might take him, if you wanted to. I would like that." Sunday dawned clear and bright, autumn showing off with gold-leafed aspens and a sky so blue it hurt to look at. Silas arrived early with a fishing rod he had borrowed from one of the ranch hands. Tommy exploded out of the cabin with the boundless energy of a fully recovered child, practically vibrating with excitement. "Are we really going fishing? Really, really?" Silas grinned at the boy's enthusiasm. "Think you can walk a mile? I can walk 10 miles. Tommy declared with the absolute confidence of the very young. Willa laughed. "Let us start with one and see how it goes." She had packed a basket with bread and cheese, apples from a tree that grew wild near the cabin. She wore a different dress today, one that fit properly, and Silas realized she must have taken it in herself, altering it to account for the weight she had lost. Her hair was down, held back from her face with a simple ribbon, and the sunlight caught golden streaks he had not noticed before. They walked together to the creek, Tommy ranging ahead like a scout, running back every few minutes to report on interesting rocks or potential fish sightings. Willa walked beside Silas, and once when the path narrowed, their hands brushed together. Neither pulled away immediately. The creek was everything Willa had promised, crystal clear water running over smooth stones, pooling in deeper sections where the current slowed. Silas showed Tommy how to bait the hook, how to cast without tangling the line. The boy took to it with fierce concentration, determined to catch something impressive. Willa spread a blanket near the water and unpacked the food. She watched Silas with her son, saw the patience in his instruction, the genuine interest he took in Tommy's excited chatter. When Tommy finally hooked a small trout and Silas helped him reel it in, both of them whooping with triumph, something in her chest cracked open. She had not let herself want anything beyond survival for so long. But watching Silas swing Tommy up onto his shoulders so the boy could see the full length of the creek, hearing her son's laughter ring out unfettered by fear or sickness, Willa felt want bloom fierce and desperate inside her. They ate lunch on the blanket while Tommy waded in the shallows, searching for interesting stones. Silas lay back on his elbows, face turned to the sun, looking more relaxed than Willa had ever seen him. "This is nice," he said. "I had forgotten what nice felt like. Me too." He turned his head to look at her. "You ever think about leaving Genoa, going somewhere with more opportunities?" "Every day. But leaving requires money, and money requires work, and work is impossible to find when you have a small child and no one willing to give you a chance." She plucked at the edge of the blanket. "Sometimes I feel like I am trapped in a circle I can never break out of. I am too poor to leave, and I am too stuck to stop being poor." "What if you had help?" Her chest tightened. "I cannot keep taking from you, Silas. You have already given so much." "That is not what I meant." He sat up, his expression serious. "What if it was not giving? What if it was partnership?" Willa's heart began to hammer. "I do not understand." "I think you do." The air between them felt thick with possibility and terror. Willa forced herself to breathe. "Silas, we have known each other for less than 2 weeks. I know. It is crazy." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she had come to recognize as a sign of his own nervousness. "But I have not been able to stop thinking about you, about Tommy. About what it might be like to have something real, something that matters. You do not owe me anything. Not marriage, not— Damn it, Willa, this is not about owing." The words came out fierce. "I am not offering because I feel obligated. I am offering because for the first time in 10 years I want to stay somewhere. And that somewhere is wherever you are." Willa's eyes stung. "You do not know me well enough to say that. Then let me know you better. Let me stay, let me court you properly if that is what you need. But do not tell me what I feel is not real just because it happened fast." Tommy splashed back over to them, oblivious to the tension. "Mama, look, I found a green rock." Willa took the stone her son offered, turning it over in her hand. "It is beautiful, baby. Can we stay longer, please?" "A little longer." As Tommy ran off again, Willa met Silas's gaze. "I am afraid," she admitted quietly. "I lost Jack and it nearly destroyed me. If I let myself care about you and then you leave, or worse, I do not think I could survive it." "I am afraid too," Silas said. "Terrified, if I am being honest. But I am more afraid of walking away and spending the rest of my life wondering what could have been. What if it does not work? What if we are making a mistake? Then we will figure it out together. But Willa, I do not think this is a mistake. I think this is the first right thing I have done in a long time." She wanted to believe him. God, she wanted to believe that happiness was possible again, that she deserved it, that life could offer more than just survival. But the fear was so big. a crushing weight on her chest. "Can I think about it?" she asked. "Can you give me time?" "Take all the time you need. I am not going anywhere." They stayed at the creek until the shadows grew long and Tommy began to tire, the boys' steps dragging as they walked back toward the cabin. Silas hoisted him onto his shoulders again, and Tommy's head drooped against Silas's hat, eyes drifting closed. Willa walked beside them in silence, her mind churning. At the cabin, Silas carefully transferred the sleeping boy to Willa's arms. Their faces were close, and for a moment Willa thought he might kiss her. But he just smiled, touched her cheek gently, and stepped back. "Good night, Willa. Good night." She watched him ride away into the dusk, her heart at war with her head. Over the next 3 weeks, Silas kept his word. He came by every evening after work, but he did not push, did not demand an answer to the question that hung between them. Instead, he simply showed up, steady and reliable as sunrise. He fixed more things around the cabin, played with Tommy, talked with Willa about everything and nothing. He told her about his dreams of owning land, maybe a small ranch where he could raise horses. She told him about her love of reading, how she had to sell most of her books after Jack died but still treasured the 3 she had kept. He brought her a book from the general store, a collection of poems, and she cried when she opened it. "You did not have to do this," she said, clutching the book to her chest. "I wanted to. I saw it and thought of you." They were becoming woven together, Willa realized. Their lives tangling in ways both terrifying and exhilarating. Tommy had started calling Silas by name, running to greet him when he arrived. Willa found herself listening for the sound of his horse, felt disappointment on the rare evenings when work kept him away. One night, as they sat on the cabin's front step watching the stars emerge, Willa finally spoke the truth that had been growing inside her. "I love you." Silas went still beside her. "What? I love you." She turned to face him, her heart racing but her voice steady. "I tried not to. I told myself it was too soon, too risky. But I love you anyway, Silas Jennings, and if you are still asking, my answer is yes." The smile that spread across his face was pure joy. "You mean it." "I mean it." He cupped her face in his hands and kissed her, gentle at first, then deeper as she responded. Willa felt herself melting into him, all the loneliness and fear of the past months burning away in the warmth of his embrace. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Silas pressed his forehead to hers. "I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret this," he promised. "I know." They were married 3 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the church in Genoa. Dr. Patterson stood up as Silas's witness, and Mrs. Chen from the general store stood with Willa. Tommy held a ring cushion he could not stop fidgeting with, and when the preacher asked if anyone objected, the boy piped up with, "I do not object. I want Silas to be my papa." Laughter rippled through the small gathering, and Silas scooped Tommy up, holding him as he and Willa exchanged vows. Willa wore her mother's wedding dress, carefully preserved through years and miles, altered to fit her smaller frame. Silas wore his best clothes, his hair neatly trimmed, his eyes never leaving his bride's face. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, the kiss they shared was sweet and full of promise. Tommy cheered, and Willa laughed against Silas's mouth, happiness flooding through her so powerfully she felt dizzy with it. They had a small reception at the cabin, which Silas had spent the past week thoroughly renovating. New roof, sealed walls, a second room added on for sleeping. It was not fancy, but it was sturdy and weatherproof, and it was theirs. Mrs. Chen had made a cake, and the few neighbors who came brought food and offered congratulations. That night, after Tommy fell asleep in his new room, Silas carried Willa to their bed. They made love slowly, learning each other's bodies, whispering promises in the darkness. Afterward, Willa lay with her head on Silas's chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "Are you happy?" he asked, his fingers trailing through her hair. "Happier than I ever thought I could be again," she answered honestly. "You saved us, Silas, not just from poverty but from drowning in loneliness. You saved me too. I was half a person before I met you, just going through the motions. You made me want to be whole again." Willa lifted her head to kiss him. "Then we saved each other." Life settled into a new rhythm after that. Silas continued working the cattle ranch, but he was home every night without fail. Willa took in sewing to contribute to their finances, her skill with a needle becoming known throughout the area. Tommy thrived, growing taller and stronger, calling Silas Papa without any prompting or confusion. Silas legally adopted him in the spring, and they celebrated with a picnic at the creek where they had gone fishing that first Sunday. As the months passed, Silas and Willa saved every spare dollar, planning for the future. Silas's dream of owning land became their shared dream. They would lie awake at night, Tommy sleeping soundly in the next room, and talk about what they wanted. Not a huge spread, they agreed. Just enough acres to run some cattle or horses with good water and grazing. A real house, built solid with room for their family to grow. It was that last part that made Willa's breath catch. Family to grow. They had not been actively preventing pregnancy, both of them wanting more children, but nothing had happened yet. Willa tried not to worry, tried to trust that it would happen when it was meant to. But sometimes late at night, she felt the old fear creep back in. What if she could not give Silas children? What if he regretted choosing a widow with an existing son? Silas seemed to sense her worries even when she did not voice them. He would pull her close and remind her that he had married her, not the possibility of future children. That Tommy was his son in every way that mattered. That if it was just the three of them for the rest of their lives, that would be more than enough. "But you want more children," Willa said one night. "I know you do." "I want you happy and healthy," Silas corrected. "Children would be wonderful, but they are not required for me to be content with my life." His certainty soothed the raw edges of her anxiety. And then, in the late summer of their first year of marriage, Willa's monthly bleeding did not come. She waited, afraid to hope, but when another month passed with the same absence, she allowed herself to consider the possibility. She told Silas on a Sunday evening after Tommy had gone to bed. They were sitting on their front step, as had become their custom, watching the day fade into twilight. "I think I might be pregnant," she said quietly. Silas's head whipped around, his eyes wide. "You think? I am late. 2 months now, and I have been feeling sick in the mornings." She put a hand on her still flat stomach. "I did not want to say anything until I was more certain, but I think there is a baby." The joy on Silas's face was almost painful to witness. He pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. "A baby," he whispered. "Willa, we are going to have a baby," she laughed, tears streaming down her face. We really are." Dr. Patterson confirmed the pregnancy a week later, estimating that Willa would deliver in the early spring. Silas immediately became absurdly protective, insisting that Willa rest more, take on less sewing work, let him handle all the heavy chores. Willa tolerated his hovering with good humor, touched by his concern even when it became excessive. Tommy was ecstatic about becoming a big brother. He would talk to Willa's growing belly, telling the baby about all the things they would do together. "I will teach you to fish," he announced seriously one evening, "and to find good rocks, and Papa will teach us both to ride horses." "That is right," Silas agreed, ruffling Tommy's hair. "We will all learn together." The pregnancy progressed normally, Willa's body changing as the baby grew. By winter, she was unmistakably round, and Silas would spend evenings with his hand on her belly, marveling at the movements within. They chose names during those long winter nights. Samuel for a boy, after Silas's father. Rose for a girl, after Willa's mother. In February, Silas came home with unexpected news. The ranch he worked for was selling off some of its land, and the foreman had approached Silas about buying a parcel. 160 acres, Silas told Willa, his voice shaking with excitement. Creek running through it, good grazing, a stand of cottonwoods for timber. He is willing to sell it to me for a fair price because I have worked hard for him. Can we afford it? Willa asked. Just barely. We would have to use most of our savings, and we would need to take out a loan for the rest. But Willa, it is a chance to have our own place. To build something that will last, that we can pass on to Tommy and the baby. Willa thought of the years she had spent trapped by poverty, unable to move forward. She thought of the cabin that would never truly be theirs, that could be taken away at any moment. And she thought of the future stretching ahead, full of possibility. Let us do it, she said. Let us take the chance. They purchased the land in early March. Silas filed the deed at the county office, and when he brought the paper home, he and Willa both cried as they read their names inscribed as owners. It was the first thing of real value either of them had ever possessed. The baby decided to make an appearance 2 weeks later on a blustery March evening. Willa's pains started just after supper, mild at first but quickly intensifying. Silas sent Tommy to fetch Dr. Patterson while he stayed with Willa, his face pale but his hands steady as he helped her through each contraction. The labor was long and difficult. As the hours stretched past midnight and into the early morning, Silas began to panic, terrified that something was going wrong. But Willa, gritting her teeth through the pain, remained focused. She had done this before, knew what to expect. When Dr. Patterson told her to push, she bore down with all her strength. Their son entered the world just as dawn broke, his first cries strong and indignant. Silas wept as he cut the cord, as Dr. Patterson placed the baby in Willa's arms. Samuel Jack Jennings, they named him. Samuel for Silas's father, Jack for the man who had given Willa her first happiness. Tommy crept in once things were cleaned up, his eyes huge as he stared at his new brother. "He is so small," he whispered. "You were that small once," Willa told him, exhausted but radiant. "And you will help us take care of him, right?" "I will protect him forever," Tommy declared with the fierce certainty of a 6-year-old making a vow. Silas gathered his whole family into his arms, Tommy and Willa and tiny Samuel, and felt a completeness he had never imagined possible. This, he thought, this was what he had been drifting toward all those years. Not running from something, but moving toward this perfect moment when everything finally made sense. Spring turned to summer, and they began building on their new land. Silas worked with Tommy at his side, teaching the boy as they raised the frame of a new house. It would take time, maybe a year or more before it was finished, but they had time now. They had land and family and future. Willa would bring lunch to them in the fields, Samuel strapped to her chest in a sling she had sewn. They would eat together in the shade of the cottonwoods, the creek murmuring nearby, and make plans for what would go where. The house here, the barn there, a chicken coop and garden close to the house. Dreams taking solid shape, timber and nails and sweat. By the time Samuel was walking, the house was finished. 2 stories, 4 bedrooms, a wide porch that wrapped around 2 sides. Silas carried Willa over the threshold on the day they moved in, Tommy dancing ahead of them with Samuel toddling after, and they christened each room with laughter. That night, in their new bedroom with windows that looked out over their land, Silas made love to his wife with a tenderness that brought tears to both their eyes. Afterward, they lay tangled together, listening to the sounds of their sons sleeping down the hall. You remember that first day?" Willa asked. "When you heard Tommy crying, every detail, the way you looked standing in that doorway like you were ready to fight the whole world to protect your boy. I was terrified you would ride past, that no one would stop, no one would care." She pressed a kiss to his shoulder. "Thank God you stopped. Thank God you let me stay." They were quiet for a moment, thinking about all the small choices that had led them here. If Silas had taken a different road that morning, if Willa's pride had kept her from accepting help, if either of them had been too afraid to risk their hearts again. "I want more children," Willa said suddenly. "At least 2 more. I want this house full of life and noise and love." Silas grinned. 2 more, that would give us 4 total. "Is that too many?" "Not even close. I would have a dozen with you if you wanted." Willa laughed. "Let us start with 2 more and see how we manage." 2 years later, their daughter Rose was born, followed 18 months after that by another son they named Nathan. The house did become full of noise and life, the days blurring together in the chaotic beauty of raising children. Tommy grew into a serious, responsible young man, taking his role as oldest sibling with gravity. Samuel was wild and fearless, always climbing something or chasing after the ranch dogs. Rose had her mother's gentle nature and her father's stubborn streak. Nathan was still a baby, but he had a smile that could light up a room. Silas's horse ranch grew slowly but steadily. He had a gift for training, a patience that worked wonders with even the most difficult animals. People came from as far as Carson City to buy his horses, and the ranch's reputation spread. Money was still tight some years, easier others, but they never again faced the desperate poverty that had marked Willa's widowhood. On their 10th anniversary, Silas took Willa back to the creek where they had gone fishing that first Sunday. The children stayed with Mrs. Chen in town, giving them a rare day alone. They packed a picnic and walked hand in hand along the familiar path. "You remember what you asked me here," Willa said as they spread the blanket. "About partnership. I remember you said I did not know you well enough to make such an offer. I was wrong about that. You knew exactly what you needed to know." She leaned against him, content. "You saw me clearly from the start. Saw past the poverty and desperation to who I actually was. I saw a woman fighting to protect what mattered. I saw strength and love and determination. That was enough." They ate lunch slowly, talking about everything and nothing. About Tommy's plans to attend school in Carson City. About Samuel's latest misadventure involving a tree and a bee's nest. About Rose's first attempts at reading. About Nathan's recent fascination with the ranch dogs. About the new foals Silas was training and the quilt Willa was making for the church raffle. "We have built a good life," Willa said eventually. "Against all odds, we made something beautiful. We did. And it started the day I heard a boy crying for someone to hold him and his mother holding on with everything she had. You said you would stay if I wanted you to. And you let me stay. Best decision I ever made." Willa turned in his arms to kiss him, the kind of kiss that still made her heart race after 10 years of marriage. "Best decision I ever made too, trusting you, choosing you, building this life with you." They stayed at the creek until sunset, making love on the blanket like newlyweds, laughing at their own awkwardness, and then losing themselves in the familiar pleasure of each other. As dusk settled around them, they walked home hand in hand, the lights of their house visible in the distance. The children came running when they arrived, all 4 of them clamoring for attention, for stories, for hugs. Silas scooped up Rose and Nathan while Tommy and Samuel competed to tell their parents about everything that had happened during their absence. It was chaos and perfection. Later, after the children were in bed, Silas found Willa standing on the porch, looking out over their land. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "Everything. How close we came to missing each other. How different my life would be if you had ridden past that day." She covered his hands with hers. "How grateful I am that you stopped, that you stayed, that you loved us. I will always stay. I will always love you, you and our children, this life we have built. This is my forever, Willa. And mine." They stood together in the gathering darkness, listening to the sounds of the night settling around them. Crickets singing, horses moving in the pasture, the creek's distant murmur. Somewhere inside, one of the children called out in sleep, a wordless sound quickly soothed back into silence. Years continued to pass, each one adding new depth to their story. Tommy grew up and married a schoolteacher from Virginia City, bringing her home to the ranch for visits that filled the house with laughter. Samuel became a horse trainer like his father, working alongside Silas and eventually taking over more of the business. Rose had her mother's love of books and became a teacher herself in Genoa. Nathan inherited Tommy's seriousness and his papa's way with animals, content to work the ranch for his whole life. Grandchildren came, 9 in total over the years. The house that had once seemed so spacious now felt crowded during holidays and celebrations, and Silas and Willa could not have been happier about it. They would stand on the porch during these gatherings, watching their children and grandchildren play in the yard, and marvel at how much life had grown from that single choice to stop, to help, to stay. Willa's hair turned silver, and lines creased Silas's face. His hands grew gnarled with arthritis, and her back ached on cold mornings. But they still walked hand in hand, still sat on their porch watching the sunset, still made love with the tenderness of people who knew each other's bodies as well as their own. On their 40th anniversary, their children threw them a party that brought half of Genoa to the ranch. There was food and music and dancing, toasts that made both Silas and Willa cry. Tommy stood up and told the story of how his papa had stopped when he was sick, how Silas had saved not just his life but their whole family. "My father taught me that family is not just about blood," Tommy said, his voice thick with emotion. "It is about showing up. It is about staying when things are hard. It is about loving even when you are scared. He has been the best father I could have asked for, and I am grateful every day that he heard me crying and decided to stop." Silas had to wipe his eyes, too moved to speak. Willa kissed his cheek and whispered, "He is right, you know. You showed up for us and you never stopped showing up." "Best decision I ever made," Silas managed. "Stopping that day, staying that night, choosing you every day since." The party went on for hours, and when it finally wound down and the last guests had left, Silas and Willa sat on their porch in the darkness, exhausted but happy. 40 years, Willa said wonderingly. "When I was standing in that doorway with Tommy sick and burning up, I could not have imagined this, all of this. I could not have imagined it either. I thought I was going to drift forever, that connection was not meant for me. And then I heard a boy crying and saw his mother refusing to give up, and everything changed. You changed everything. You gave me hope when I had none left. You gave Tommy a father. You gave me a partner, a love, a life I never thought I would have again." Silas pulled her close. "You did the same for me. You made me want to be better, to build something lasting. You showed me what it meant to truly love and be loved." They sat in companionable silence, the way only people who had been together for decades could. Words were unnecessary when hearts beat in such perfect rhythm. "I am glad you stopped," Willa said eventually. "That day when you heard Tommy crying, I am glad you did not ride past. I will always stop for you, in this life and whatever comes after. You have my word, Willa Jennings. I will stay for as long as you want me. Forever then. I want you forever. Forever it is." The stars wheeled overhead, the same stars that had watched them fall in love, that had witnessed their wedding, that had looked down on every joy and sorrow of their 4 decades together. The creek still murmured in the distance, the same creek where Silas had promised to stay. The land stretched around them, the land they had bought with hope and built on with love. Inside the house, a grandchild called out in sleep, and they could hear their daughter-in-law soothing the child. The sound made them both smile, the continuation of the family they had created through courage and choice. Silas thought back to the young man he had been at 32, drifting through life with no anchor and no purpose. He thought about how close he had come to riding past that cabin, to missing the sound of a boy crying. How different everything would have been if he had chosen the easy path of non-involvement. Willa thought about the desperate woman she had been, holding her sick son and seeing no way forward. She thought about the moment when she had swallowed her pride and accepted help, the moment that had changed absolutely everything. They did not know, sitting there in the comfortable darkness of their porch, that they would have another 15 years together. They did not know about the great-grandchildren still to come, or the way the ranch would continue to grow and prosper under their son's management. They did not know about the schoolhouse that would be named after Rose, or the horse training program Samuel would develop that would become famous throughout Nevada. What they knew was this: they had found each other in the midst of desperate circumstances, and they had chosen to build something beautiful from that unlikely beginning. They had loved through hardship and joy, through sickness and health, through every challenge that life had thrown at them. And they had created not just a family but a legacy of showing up, of staying, of loving even when it was hard. "Tell me again," Willa said softly, "about the day we met." Silas smiled, knowing she did not need to hear the story but understanding her desire for it anyway. "I was riding past, heading to Carson City for work, and I heard a sound that made me stop. A boy crying like his heart was breaking, and a woman who refused to let that breaking become permanent. And what did you do?" I asked if I could help. "And when you told me you needed help, I said I would stay if you wanted me to. And I wanted you to stay. And I have stayed. Through 40 years and 4 children and 9 grandchildren and every sunrise and sunset, I have stayed, Willa. And I will keep staying for as long as there are days to live. I love you, Silas Jennings, with everything I am, with everything we have built, with every breath in my body. I love you, Willa Jennings, more than I thought it was possible to love anyone. You are my heart, my home, my reason for everything." They kissed there on the porch, 2 people in their 60s who still felt like newlyweds when they touched. 2 people who had defied odds and circumstances to build a love that would last beyond their lifetimes, carried forward in the hearts and lives of their descendants. The night grew deeper around them, and eventually they rose and went inside to their bed. They made love slowly, tenderly, with the knowledge that came from decades of learning each other. Afterward, they lay tangled together, Willa's head on Silas's chest, his arms wrapped around her. "Thank you," Willa whispered, "for stopping that day, for staying every day since, for giving me this life. Thank you for letting me stay, for trusting me with your heart, for building this life with me, always, always." They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other, 2 souls who had found their perfect match in the most unlikely of circumstances. Outside, the ranch slept peacefully, testament to everything they had built. Inside, their family slept safely, proof of the love that had begun with a simple choice to stop, to help, to stay. And in the morning, they would wake up and choose each other again, as they had every morning for 40 years and would continue to do for all the years they had left. Because that was what love meant to them. Not grand gestures or perfect circumstances, but the daily decision to show up, to stay, to hold on to each other no matter what. The boy had cried for someone to hold, and the cowboy had said he would stay if she wanted him to. She had wanted him to stay. And he had stayed, building a forever out of a single moment of compassion, a single choice to care when he could have ridden past. That choice had made all the difference. That choice had created a legacy of love that would ripple forward through generations, a testament to the power of showing up when someone needed you most. And neither of them, lying there in the darkness of their bedroom in the house they had built on the land they owned, surrounded by the family they had created, would have changed a single moment of the journey that had brought them here. This was their happily ever after, hard-won and precious, built on a foundation of courage and kindness, and the willingness to risk heartbreak for the chance at happiness. And it was more than either of them had ever dreamed possible on that autumn morning in 1871, when a cowboy heard a boy crying and decided to stop.